Ladies and gentlemen, good morning and welcome from International Data Spaces Association and the OpenDI project. My name is Thorsten Hülsmann. I'm the CFO of International Data Spaces Association and today's moderator of this IDSA live session. While more people are joining and dialing in, we can slowly start with some announcements. So first of all, as I already said, a warm welcome to all participants and to all interested people in the IDSA live sessions and the Data Spaces Dialogue. The Data Spaces Dialogue was started in June because we are achieving a topic and discussing a topic which is becoming more and more important in industry, but also in research, applied research, and in politics. This is data sharing. And as IDSA in the core focuses on sovereign data sharing, we are, since a couple of years, actively working on design principles for sovereign data spaces. And so this is also the topic of this Data Spaces Dialogue. And I'm very happy that today we have two very renowned experts from the Dutch organization TNO with us. This is, first of all, Frans van Ette from TNO. Hello, Frans, and welcome to this live session. And Matthijs Punter from TNO as well. So, hello. Gentlemen, nice that you found time and discuss with me the next hour on data sharing and on sovereign data sharing. And as this is a dialogue, well, first of all, I want to announce that to the participants, if you want to participate, please feel free to use the question tool within GoToWebinar or the chat function to raise your questions, and within my moderation I will pick the questions and distribute it to the two speakers, or maybe I can also answer the one and other on my own. We will see. So this was the first announcement, and then yes, we have a dialogue, so we don't have a very strict agenda, but what we prepared is that we discussed upfront and have two topics which we think belong directly to the discussion on design principles for European data spaces or international data spaces. This, in first instance, is one initiative which will be well reported about by Frans. This is the Data Sharing Coalition, a Dutch endeavor which is very interesting and belongs really close to the endeavor of data spaces initiatives. And the second one is the smart supplier network activities, a use case not only within IDSA, but in the Netherlands in the framework of the Brainport campus. And this will be the second input by Matthijs. Both inputs will be roughly 10 minutes. So then afterwards, we have enough time to discuss and to deepen the inputs and the relevant things. So I will just have or share with you one or two motivation slides which I prepared, and now I have to find a way to go forward. So as I said, we are talking about sovereign data sharing. Yeah? So we are not talking about data sharing as such, and we are not talking only about data platforms. We are talking about this dilemma we are witnessing since a couple of years. On the one hand side, focusing on interoperability, on data exchange, data sharing, and the sharing economy, because everyone understood right now that data is the new oil, and that, well, data can be used quite interestingly. But on the other hand, more and more companies, and especially SMEs, when we're talking about manufacturing industries, when we're talking about service industries, when we're talking about logistics and supply chain, well, they start to think about, okay, who owns the data which we are processing in the different flows, and what is about the value of data? And this is somehow this balance which we are addressing in the topic of data sovereignty to overcome this issue. And then, well, the data spaces we are discussing are proposed within the European data strategy. So the European Commission proposed 9 data spaces in key sectors. And well, definitely IDSA worked already since a couple of years on this issue. And the advantages are clear: no silos, enlarge the data pool, and also cross-sectoral usage of data. This is in the core of the debate. And so I'm very happy that, well, this framework gives a little bit the red line to our inputs and also to our discussions. And with this motivation and this introduction, I want to hand over to our first speaker. This is Franz van Ette from TNO. And yes, I think if you share your slides with us, we can go ahead with the first input. Franz.
Yeah, thank you, Thorsten. Can you see my slides now?
Yes, we can.
Good. And then I start with slide 1. That is helpful, huh?
Yeah, would be better.
Yeah, would be good. We're just first start is not the last one. Okay. So yeah, Thorsten, thanks a lot, first of all, for inviting us to the dialogue. I think it's a very useful instrument to keep each other up to date, and we like the moderation and the way that you organize this. So thanks, first of all. Yeah, what I would like to do is to give a bit of a perspective from the Netherlands, like what is happening, what is our state of play. And then Matthijs will go into the more interesting stuff of what is really happening, say, on the ground. So that is a bit the split that we made between the two of us. And Thorsten or others, please interrupt if anything is unclear or any questions arise. So maybe as a starting point, I think it's always good to mention that we are standing on the shoulders of other giants. Us being maybe not giants, but anyway, that there's many predecessors and other activities that have happened previously. So data sharing as such is really nothing new. And also this uncomfortable feeling that we all have with data platforms and where we give data away, that has also been part of the conversation already for quite some time. So in many ways, I think the conversation that we're having is not new. There's other things that have happened before, but it's getting new meaning and it's getting more priorities under the influence of a couple of things. One is that we see how the platforms are using the data, and that is not always to the advantage of everybody else who's putting the data in. And secondly, I think it's also because this value of data is becoming so apparent. So we've become much more aware than in the past that data holds value, and that is really the oil of the industry of the modern times. And then finally, maybe there's this third element, that there's also maybe on a personal and on a political level, we see a lot of negative situations occurring from the data pools, the data lakes, the platforms who are using our data not in the best positive way. So there's many reasons why these earlier initiatives are now being brought to a next level. So what should this next level be? Now, in our minds, this should be something more than agreements on sharing data or on sectoral initiatives. Those are good starting points, but we need to move to a next level. And the next level means that we need really generic data exchange systems where many organizations can exchange data. So a many-to-many data exchange situation without a man in the middle, and in a situation where we use similar protocols, similar standards, such that we are not vendor locked in any shape or form. A second element is that it should be software enabled, so not just standing there as a set of standards without any implementation perspective, and also software being used to enforce some of the mechanisms that we want to deploy. Sector independency is crucial, we feel, so that we're not having to silo again in individual sectors where we know that a lot of data is also transcending sectors. And then a third element is that it needs to be linked to international developments and standards. That's crucial, not to have to reinvent the wheel time and again. Now, we find that all of that in the IDS design principles and execution. So that is for us the reason for TNO, and I think wider in other organizations in the Netherlands, we see IDS as a very important development and the reason that we have invested quite heavily in that environment. Now, where is it happening in the Netherlands, you could ask, and on this slide you see two national initiatives, one that Thorsten already mentioned, the Data Sharing Coalition, another one which is the Dutch AI Coalition. The Data Sharing Coalition comes from the starting point that we need this cross-sectoral data sharing. And therefore, there have been, I think it's roughly now 25 to 30 organizations that have come together and are seeking implementations and are seeking a system to share data across sectors. So this has started last year. In January, is now a very active community where it's use case driven. They have a number of examples where they're working on them. So good stuff, you could say, and very much also built around the principles that were mentioned in the previous slide. The second one is the Nationale AI Coalitie, the Dutch AI Coalition. Their AI basically is the starting point, but there very soon the AI community, and this is roughly 400 organizations in the Netherlands, earmarked data sharing as a crucial component for the Netherlands to speed up in the field of AI. So we need a lot of data in AI. It comes from different areas, different organizations, different silos. And therefore, data sharing becomes important and needs to be built in such a way that it becomes easy for everybody to get involved. So in the AI coalition, there is similar to what's happening in the data sharing coalition. There is we are designing a data sharing system, and we're also exploring use cases. So other initiatives, these are not the only ones. There's other initiatives as well. I mentioned a couple below. There's Amdex in the Amsterdam economic region. Again, similar principles, similar design principles. There's a lot that the government is in fact in the Netherlands. If you are mastering the Dutch language, then data.overheid.nl is a good place to go to. There's roughly 14,000 data systems that you can access, and they also supply support in getting access to data. And then GoFair, and this is also a European thing, scientific source data, there's a lot of traction in the Netherlands on that level as well. So there's quite a bit going on, I would say, and there's a lot of interest in the Netherlands. Now, why do we like IDS in the country of tulips and windmills? Because we feel it has the right set of basic design principles of data sovereignty and federated data principles. So that's why we like, say, the starting point, and where we have been involved as TNO in writing with the likes of Fraunhofer and others in the reference architecture and other documents that have been written out of IDS. So we like the concepts, we want to contribute them, and we feel that we have a voice in there. It's also very comprehensive, that reference architecture that there is, and with very clear rules and procedures. And what we also find, well, Netherlands is a nice country. I hope you visit us at some point in time, but it's relatively small in the total European context. So we need to connect to the mainstream with our ideas and thoughts. And we feel that through IDS we can do that. And we see other countries doing the same thing, like, for instance, Finland, France, and others, Spain. So we get connected to the mainstream also through IDS, which is helpful. And then maybe the most important thing at the bottom is IDS is not only a nice knowledge institute kind of thingy or for universities. We're really about, I would say, and we is then IDS, is about execution and upscaling. So, of course, there's always more things to discover and to research, but it's time to put the rubber on the road, so to speak, and to make it work. And that is my my last slide. That's also really happening. And Matthijs will talk about the Smart Connected Supply Network, no doubt, which is a very fine example of how it's really working in action, IDS. I know that, for instance, also in mobility as a service in the Netherlands, IDS is used as the benchmark for them to build the architecture around their platform. But also in the Dutch AI coalition, we are deploying pilots on COVID, for instance, on energy transition and poverty and debtor support. Those are use cases that are really relevant in the Dutch context. And there we deploy IDS as the basic reference architecture and the software as well. So we deploy the connector in those instances. And then finally, also iShare, that's one that's very often mentioned as one of the logistical cases. There's a connection there between iShare and IDS. So IDS is not just research, it's very much real and active. Okay, and with that, I would like to hand back.
Thank you, Frans, for this valuable input. Before I hand over to Matthijs, I want maybe to ask myself one question, because sorry, this was already the last slide, so I stopped sharing my screen. No, but what I wanted to ask you, Frans, when we are talking about data spaces and the European data spaces approach, often the European values are discussed, and you mentioned also a little bit this topic of data sovereignty and this avoiding vendor locked-ins. From your point of view, are these values, European values, are they pure data values, or are they somehow related to the FAIR principles of data sharing? What is your opinion on this? Maybe you can clarify this a little bit.
Yeah, you could really take it very much top down. I think the concern that Europe has in general, I think, and that also came back in the GDPR and in another context, is the fact that we see that in the business models that are being deployed in other countries outside Europe, not necessarily the interest of the individual or the individual organizations are taking as a starting point. And I think that is the real issue that Europe has with, say, the way that the internet has devolved over time, and where we find that there are, in the new world of data sharing, or how platforms have devolved, how data is being captured or used or deployed, that is not anymore in the best interest of humanity, if you talk about it that way. Mm-hmm. And if you then translate that to, okay, what should we be doing in the world of data and business, is to make sure that people who basically created the data and the individuals where the data is connected to, they should be owning, if that's possible with data, they should be at least trying to be at the forefront, and their interest should be taken as the starting point of everything else. And in that sense, data sovereignty is a crucial starting point for any reference architecture that we are looking at. We want to have the data owner, the starter of the data, having to have a say in what's happening with their data. And that should not be just hollow words, that should be translated in, for instance, the software tooling that is being deployed by IDS. So it should be actionable, and in that sense, it really fits from top to down, really, you could say. Okay, perfect. Thank you very much for this clarification and this input. So, Matthijs, supplier network. This is your topic since a long time, and yes, we can see your slides, and looking forward.
So thank you so much. I'm a colleague, by the way, of Frans at TNO. So on one hand, I'm looking at data sharing from a, let's say, more generic point of view. And on the other hand, we apply it in several domains. And the manufacturing domain is, a very important one for us. And actually also for the Netherlands. If you look at manufacturing in the Netherlands, it's very much about high-tech manufacturing. So end products coming from the Netherlands, which we're proud of. You can see some of them here on the screen, like the semiconductor equipment being built by ASML, or the medical scanners built by Philips. Very complex products, actually sold in very low volumes, but very expensive per machine. And also sold in a very high mix. So different configurations for different customers. It needs to be customized. And so manufacturing really is about how to support the manufacturing of these kinds of things. And then it is not just about the OEMs, so big names building these very complex machines, but also their supply networks. So really, when we investigated this, and this is one example of ASML, for instance, if you look at this semiconductor equipment and you draw a map of all the companies they work with needed to produce this very low volume of high complexity machines, then that is spread out over the Netherlands and also elsewhere in Europe. This picture nicely highlights that. And then if you look at the problems you come across, then it is not just about, it's obviously about the technology needed for that equipment, but it's also about synchronizing all the operations needed between the organizations who are involved in manufacturing of this very complex equipment. And that is where the Smart Connected Supply Network really started. Because as you can see in this slide, a simplified overview of such a supply network. Obviously, there's the OEM. It needs to work with the first tier, a second tier, a third tier. Then there are wholesalers or providers of raw materials like steel or other things. They all need to work together, and they need to share data amongst each other. And that's a problem at this moment. It works if you are a big OEM and you can set up a portal or a cloud, and you say to all your first tier suppliers, please use this. It also works at the end of the chain, but in order to be competitive, they all need to work together. Also, the more specialized and smaller companies in the middle of this network. And yeah, what do they then need to exchange? We asked that. Obviously, it is about order information. It is about technical product designs like 3D drawings, measurements, and it's not just from the top of the chain to the bottom, but it's also the other way around, because you also would like to share quality information, information about the progress of manufacturing. And this is currently placing a significant burden on these companies. They need to manually copy information. It is difficult to share data. Data is not adequately protected. Think of the sometimes highly sensitive designs which need to be exchanged. So there really was a problem at hand. We were asked by a group of those companies to look into this. And then initially, and this was already a few years ago, we looked at, well, really traditional approaches, like, well, maybe we should go for EDI messaging. It's still being done. Do it all over the place. Send electronic messages from one company to the other. But we found that this is actually quite difficult to scale. And well, it is about transmitting data, but you don't have built-in controls about the usage of that data, for instance. But the biggest problem there was that it is not scalable, because these manufacturing companies today, they work for OEM number one in the semiconductor domain, and tomorrow they work for an OEM in the medical domain. And today they work with this group of suppliers, and tomorrow they might need to work with a different group of suppliers. So it's very difficult to scale such a solution. Another approach could have been to set up some sort of centralized cloud or centralized platform, but that would create a dependence on this single entity, which also has its drawbacks. Can you still control your own data? What does it lead to? So people were also very reluctant to start doing that. And so that is actually where also IDS came into play. We wanted to have a solution whereby a manufacturing company could connect only once, so set up the technology only once, and then communicate with the complete supply chain. And data sovereignty for them would mean that they would retain complete control over who they would share their data with. And And so we worked with a large group of manufacturing companies. We also brought together the involved IT vendors, for instance, the suppliers of their ERP systems or their planning systems. And on the right, you can see sort of a drawing of how it now looks like. So we have a network of service providers, IT companies providing IDS-based connectivity, and they have tight interconnections amongst each other. So they speak the same semantics, they have standardized rules on data access and data usage. And as a manufacturing company, what you need to do is you need to go to one of those service providers, ask them to set up the required connectivity infrastructure for you. Maybe they need to make a link to an existing ERP system or an existing database. And from there, you can then communicate with everybody else who did the same, since all those service providers are so very well interconnected. And they share the same technology, the same semantics, and all of that. And what we've noticed is that this approach leads to, first of all, data sovereignty, because the manufacturing companies, they can really decide who am I now going to share data with. And they can control what is being done with this data. But it also leads to significant adoption, because since you only need to connect once, it is very easy. You do that for maybe a single group of customers or a single group of suppliers, and you involve some IT vendors. And for those IT vendors, there is a business case to start connecting others as well. And maybe there are other customers and other suppliers of your customers which also want to connect to this standard. So this is really oil staining quite rapidly, with many new service providers joining and building solutions on top of this, and also many more manufacturing companies adopting this. And the interesting thing is that where we started off with a very standardized set of order information and all of that, that also new use cases are being developed on top of this. So this is really oil staining and growing fast. It also means for us to move on and also think a bit more strategically, and that's also some food for thought I would like to bring to today's discussion about the sovereignty also on from a manufacturing point of view. So data sharing and data sovereignty, but we also need some sovereignty when it comes to the manufacturing in Europe. And I think digital platforms play a very crucial role in that. There is a lot of existing theory on platforms, so this is a simplified version of the work of Professor Gore from Surrey University on platforms. We have platforms everywhere, and one of the type of platforms she mentions are product platforms. So when you build a single, well, in this case, Sony with its Walkmans, they have a platform, the Walkman platform, and they can make all kinds of colors of that platform, all kinds of different types of Walkmans. But that is an internal platform in the sense that it is controlled fully by Sony. And then if you move on, you can think, okay, there are also platforms which are controlled by a single company, but which have an impact on an entire supply chain. So here you see the platform used by Volkswagen for their electric cars. It's developed by Volkswagen, but it has an impact on the network as a whole. All the suppliers, they also need to work with this platform. And the third category, and that's more in the area of standards, I would say, is that this platform is driven by an entire industry. So everybody can build solutions based on a standardized concept. So if you think of platforms, you can think of how they are controlled, either internally as one organization controlling the rest, and on a sort of industrial co-opetition type of level. And what we found out also by doing this in the smart connected supplier network is that when you apply this concept to digital platforms for manufacturing, it can also have a very significant impact. So in this picture, you see again the levels of control internally, supply chain, one organization controlling the rest, and a more industrial level where you can really have competition between everyone involved. And what we then see in terms of manufacturing data space, that there can be all kinds of functions. There's obviously the manufacturing function. Somebody still needs to make something. But there's also the innovation function. You need to do new things and things in a better way. Sometimes there is a market making function, bringing together physical supply and demand. And there is a data sharing function, so bringing together data sources from one organization and the other. And what we've noticed is that many of those initiatives have started on this middle level, with one organization starting with a cloud platform or some centralized initiative, bringing together data of multiple organizations. And then it's very easy to make a bridge to those other functions, because if you have the data, then maybe you can also think about bringing together supply and demand. And if you have the data, then maybe you can also think of maybe AI-enabled innovations. And that is a problem for the manufacturing industry, because that means that those new entrants are likely to gain much attention, also some of the profit margin, which is currently with manufacturing companies. And we think to break this, obviously manufacturing companies need to think about this, but data sovereignty and open standards can play a crucially important role, because if you can do the data sharing on this industrial level, on this level of competition where everybody can play along, then it also enables manufacturing organizations to play a role in these other functions of manufacturing data spaces, like market making, like new approaches and collaborations in manufacturing, and also new innovative approaches. And the funny thing is, to close off this part, is that this is exactly what we currently see in the smart connected supply network. We started off with just plain supply chain collaboration, and now we see new initiatives coming up whereby people say, okay, but if we share this data in a controlled way, then we can also think of new ways of collaboration and new ways of manufacturing those products. So that's also something I would like to bring to the table today. And with that, I would like to hand it back to you, Thorsten.
Thank you very much, Matthijs. And I think this we can maybe discuss your input in well, 2 or maybe 3 parts. And let me just start with the use case as such, because I know that you are also involved with the supply network in the launching coalition of IDSA, and maybe it would be interesting also for the participants to hear what is the maturity status from your point of view, because for those who are not informed about this launching coalition, so we tried to make the upscaling and the really bringing the rubber to the road, what Franz proclaimed in his initial remarks, within a group of some 20 or 22 use cases in the so-called launching coalition. And maybe Matthijs, you can explain a little bit. Is it still a use case? No, I don't think so. It's a business case already, right?
Yes, it's a business case. So these service providers, they have it as a commercial business. They have salesmen going to manufacturing companies, large and small, to sell their offerings. And obviously it's also a business for the manufacturing companies as well. They manufacture stuff and they need to order things from their suppliers and sell things to their customers, and they use the technology for it. If you look at the launching coalition, obviously, if you want to put this in practice, if you want to have, as a service provider, this as a commercial offering, you need to have certain guarantees in place, that the standard is being maintained, that you can certify it when needed, that you have all the elements in place of such a data ecosystem. And that is actually what we're now doing through the launching coalition, to make sure that all these elements are in place. We do it on 2 levels. On one hand, there's the IDSA level, so with the International Data Space Association managing the generic standards. And then on the other side, within the Netherlands, we are working, or we have set up a foundation, Smart Connected Supply Network Foundation, to manage the additional agreements needed, which are specific for this collaboration. Well, IDSA is now in place, the launching coalition has delivered, the foundation is in place within the Netherlands for the governance of our sector-specific things. And that means that we can now simply start, get going further, attracting new service providers and attracting new manufacturing companies. And it's good to mention that whereas SCSN so far, as you could also see in the slide, was mainly a Dutch initiative, that through the launching coalition, we've now also been able to attract several new partners from other European countries, which will announce their participation in the next months to come.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much for this additional input. And now I come to the second part, which came immediately to my mind. I don't know if this is a question to you, Matthijs, or maybe also to Franz, because I found it quite philosophically what you made at the end of your input, because so far we have talked about data ecosystems. And I think this is an ongoing, well, open question, how let's say business models within data ecosystems will develop in the future, or have been maybe already developed. And I think to apply this view from a data ecosystem onto an open collaborative manufacturing or supplier network is exactly what is needed in this discussion, because it brings, from my point of view, this very abstract question of how are data ecosystems working in the future to a very concrete use case where within an existing network of different production companies, you can easily understand the added value. And is this the right perception? I don't know who wants to answer, but at least
maybe
this was my perception.
A very practical example of how this can work if you don't think about data sovereignty here. So I won't mention the company name in this case, but this was a platform provider in the context of milling. So milling is a manufacturing operation. And this company said, well, you can connect to our platform. So it was a data company. You can connect to our platform and then share your spare capacity with potential customers. So there was this small company, manufacturing company, said, okay, that's interesting. So they signed up. And well, this really got started. And after a few weeks, they were not only selling their spare capacity through this platform, but also much of the remainder. So they were working 40 hours a week, maybe more, for this platform. And they did not have any time anymore to directly engage with their existing customers, because they now all did the platform. Okay.
Yeah.
So they became dependent of this platform. Then this platform said, hey, but we now know about your production, who you're producing for, and what they need. You also need raw materials, so why can't we use some clever algorithms to source the raw materials for you? So platform started doing that as well. Third thing was, maybe we have an idea, we have additional companies which want to do business with you, so maybe you need a new machine, and we can finance that particular machine for you. You need a loan, we can arrange that loan, and then you will have that machine. So in a few stages, this manufacturing company became fully dependent on this very single platform, which started off just as a digital data initiative, but which really started also going into those other functions. So the conversations we now continuously have also with sector organizations of manufacturing companies is how to prevent this. Because on one hand, it is very interesting to use your spare capacity, attract new customers, but on the other hand, you also want a role there to play for manufacturing companies. And then at the end of the day, it comes back to data sovereignty, being able to say, I'm not only sharing my data through this platform, but also directly with some other companies, and maybe also have some competition between those market makers. That I'm not just on one platform, but on multiple platforms.
Yeah. Okay.
Then
Thank you.
data sovereignty becomes a reality also in the physical world, in this case of CNC milling of components.
Yeah. Franz, coming back to this discussion of business models or operation models of data ecosystems, the two initiatives which you mentioned in your input, are there any concrete use cases where this topic is maybe not only discussed but also visible, like Matthijs explained it here in the manufacturing industry?
Yes. So in the Data Sharing Coalition, there are a couple. So yeah, I would have to think again what they were, but there's concrete examples in the energy sector, in the financial sector, loans related to, I believe it also has to do with energy consumption linked, where really trying to keep the connection between our, say, the more, okay, this is what we want to achieve in the end, but really make it work already on the short term. Yeah. In the AI coalition, there were the three that I just mentioned. So we deploy it in COVID, in the energy sector, and in the poverty. So yes, and that's always the crucial part, because the promise is really nice that we have. The vision is good, but it's not easily implemented. So the easy solution always is, there's somebody who's willing to help you out. It's Google, or it's Facebook, or it's Amazon. We have this great set of services. Come to us. Only give me your data, and I'll take care of you. I put my arms around your shoulder, and I lead you to the promised land, basically. Yeah, easy. I use Gmail. I know how easy it functions. At the same time, you also know that there's another side to it, because these free services are not for free, and that is really the thing that we have to solve. And the way that we solve it now is with the right setup and the right architecture and the right things, but it's hard work. So it has these two sides of the medal. You can take the easy road with the platforms and get swallowed in this future that Matthijs just mentioned, and you're being basically helped into the dark side of the data lens, so to speak. It's hard work. It's hard work that we have to do, but we have to do it. Otherwise, we end up in a bad place. That's for sure.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. So let us keep this topic of domain-specific data spaces and this discussion, that we shouldn't forget it for the end of the discussion. I now want to relate to two or three questions which I am observing in the chat. So the first one, which fits, I think, quite well to Matthijs' input from Jacques Spee. To what extent can Tier 1 or Tier 3 suppliers drive data ecosystems without the Tier 1st or the Tier 1s? Matthijs, this is an interesting question. What is your opinion on this?
We also experienced that. So obviously, when we started off a couple of years ago, we also started with the OEMs because we thought, okay, this should be of most interest to the OEMs as well. And then they said, yeah, but we already have some systems in place, and let them just use these systems, and then it's okay. And oh, by the way, if they want to organize themselves, that's also good for us. So please let them do that, and that's it. Now we had in this case the fortunate effect that, or the fortunate situation that some of these middle tier suppliers were already organized. So they already recognized, not only from a data sharing perspective, but also from a more, let's say, global competitive perspective, that they needed to work together in the areas of skills, so having sufficient people, in the areas of market, so having joint marketing also abroad, and in the area of technology. So we could leverage that, and that's how we started the initiative. Now, the interesting thing was that after it had been started, the OEMs came back and said, okay, but now there are interesting things to do, because maybe we can now also think along with some new ideas which might be on our side. So yes, it is possible to do it. Nevertheless, it's in other cases it might be easier if an OEM is driving this. I think it depends on the case.
Okay, thank you. Then we have an input from Shannon Callaghan from Australia, but Shannon, you have to wait because it's first of all, I want to ask one question by Freya van den Boom, and I think it is related also somehow to the initiatives. The question is, are there any examples regarding car data, the connected car ecosystem in particular? This is the question, and I don't know if one of you both have any idea, any use case of this data sovereignty approach within car data.
Thinking about talking traffic, Matthijs? So
yeah,
that is,
yeah. I've got one thing and show it in a moment, but go ahead.
Okay, he's got another one then. And the other one was MAS, but MAS is more about traffic patterns. So it's a lot of traveling, trains, metros, what have you, and as a user, you can easily find your way from A to B, a little bit like what you again would use with Google, but then better. But this one is talking traffic is traffic systems where cars are connected with, for instance, traffic signs. So cars come in a certain volume to a certain square, for instance, and if the volume is higher than X, then that traffic light turns on green. So talking traffic is meant to make sure that traffic is flowing as fluently as possible, and also that security is being taken into account. So if certain things are happening, if ambulances are coming, or if somebody is speeding, and etc., then the traffic system, traffic signals, etc., can react to that. That's the one that I know. Talking traffic, it's called.
Okay, thank you, Frans. Matthijs?
Yeah, so I'm not sure if you can see my screen now. I think you can.
Yeah.
It's well, I just want to refer to the oops, sorry, here we are, to the IDSA Twitter account. I think yesterday we had a tweet on this, that there is at this moment a call to the car manufacturers to establish this mobility data space, and to do that in a data sovereign way. So this is from Germany. What we had last year in the Netherlands was a report from the car or the road safety inspectorate, and they said, okay, we now have all these connected cars, smart cars, the self-driving cars, but we occasionally see that one is driving straight over a roundabout or missing a traffic signal, or other things. And actually that safety related data is something which should be shared amongst all the car manufacturers, because of security reasons and safety reasons, if you can learn from each other. And I think actually the only way to do it is to take a data sovereign approach, because this is also for the car manufacturers highly sensitive data, also commercially sensitive data. On the other hand, it is a common good. We all need it to make our cars safer in the future as they become more autonomous, self-driving, and so on. So yeah, it's really going in that direction, in my view.
Yeah. Okay. Perfect. Thank you very much for this link. And just to complement this Datenraummobilität, how it is called in German language, will be facilitated by ACATech, which is the National Academy of Technical Sciences. And most probably it will be also Fraunhofer and IDS who will participate in a small project on this. So this will be something we can witness next year. So now, as promised, I want to come back to a question of Shannon from Australia. It is related, this question, to the public administration sphere. And Shannon is wondering if we have examples of IDS in public administration, or maybe where governments are related or linked, for instance, to manufacturing industry. So I don't know, Frans or Matthijs, do you have any, I mean, I think obviously in iShare initiative, for instance, in all these traffic things, the government is included or not?
Yeah, I think that's one. The other one is the two cases that we have done in the Nationale AI-coalitie, that one is regarding COVID. So that is of sharing data between labs and sharing data also on photos for the analysis of what happens with lungs in the case of COVID. There we applied IDS as the software, the connector itself, and we used it in the context also of what we call the personal health train in the Netherlands. And that concept is that the data is not being pulled, but that the algorithm goes to the local data stores, does its work, and then comes back with the result itself. So that was on the COVID case. The other one on the public sector that we are deploying now is in the poverty reduction and deaths area. And what we try to do there is that, say, data about individuals in the Netherlands is being captured in various government systems, but they're well protected, obviously, for very good reasons. But to help people that are potentially going into a poverty situation, you want to connect those databases one way or the other. And for that, we deploy IDS connectors. And there's, of course, a very important role to play for consent management of the individual, that they allow you to combine those data sources. But once that is allowed by the individual, then we can start doing analyses and help the individual if they threaten to come into such a situation, and support them and give them the right advice, etc. So yes, IDS is also being deployed in government settings, be it that it's not really in operational settings, but we are experimenting with that. Government really wants to be absolutely sure that we do the right stuff, obviously, for very good reasons.
Yeah, thank you. Matthijs, any additions?
Yeah, so I think we are on the verge now. Eh? So you see that these new things are popping up, but I do also see the risk that governments will start deploying all kinds of different standards for different domains again. And so here we're talking about healthcare. I know, for instance, that the European Commission is in the logistics domain thinking about freight transport information to replace all the paper waybills with digital formats. So there they have announced new legislation that you can use digital platforms for that. So you can put the data on a digital platform, and then they set certain requirements for such platforms, which is great. But then I would say that we then should make sure that within those requirements are horizontal standards, because, I mean, why should this be different for logistics than in health or in energy? Obviously, the domain is different, and there might be certain specific legal requirements, but the technology and open standards to ensure data sovereignty, those could very well be the same.
Yeah, okay, thank you. And maybe I also want to complement with some cases or observations from the German smart city landscape. I think this is also quite interesting, because what we are witnessing at the moment is that local authorities start to pool their data and well, assemble, for instance, companies from various industries or public traffic providers on data platforms, which are provided and or facilitated by the city itself, by the local authorities. And then the question is, well, they say, okay, we have so many data available out of our operations, and we give it for free to everyone to use, but the people or the companies are only allowed to use the data if they can guarantee by a legal contract that these data will be used to make, let's say, the city as such better. Now, this is a quite ethical or philosophical approach, and I think this has also to do with the issue what Franz mentioned, the consent management. And I think in such environments, an own standard to really technically enforce these legal agreements, which very much would be very interesting. And therefore, I see in the next months or years, maybe also these technical uptake in these smart city environments, which are somehow facilitated by the local authorities themselves. So this is just an observation from the cities in Germany around us, and I'm pretty much sure that in a couple of weeks or months, there will be also local authorities joining the association. We just have to find a membership fee arrangement for them, because usually we only accept companies to become a member. So this will be something. But this is only to complement. Okay, time is running. We only have some 5 minutes left. I cannot pick up every question, but I think there's one from Jack Spee again, which is maybe interesting. All questions are interesting, but we can handle it in the remaining 2 or 3 minutes. Several AI technologies need massive data for algorithm development and validation. And the question is, how is IDS or sovereignty as such addressing that need? I think, Franz, this has something to do with the AI coalition in the Netherlands. Maybe you can share some thoughts about this.
Yeah, well, say IDS basically builds the trust in the way that's being set up and the way that it's being engineered, and also the total concept and software behind it is building the trust for people to share data that is required for machine learning. And well, because what we see very often right now is is 2 concerns basically for machine learning to happen when data needs to come from multiple sources. One is the business discussion, like why should I give away data? Well, that is a discussion you need to have anyway, and IDS is not going to solve that discussion. That has to happen on a business logic level. But secondly, then is, can I trust that my data is being deployed in the right manner and on the conditions that I set, that I want to set, and their IDS is crucial. So we believe that with the concepts of IDS, one of the 2 constraints is being met. Like, yeah, you can trust the data is being shared in the right manner, that it's being used in the way that you have demanded, that you want, that you can see back, that you get rewarded for if need be, if you have agreed upon that, etc., etc. It's certified, you know what's happening basically. You work in a trusted system, and that is what IDS fulfills in that concept.
Yeah, and maybe also to complement this, for those who are interested, IDSA is engaged in 3 or 4 projects which are exactly dealing with the topic. I'm referring to one very new one. It's called EU Hubs for Data. And in this, data innovation hubs, which are, let's say, manipulating data in a sovereign way, is investigated. So please have a look and stay tuned with this EU Hubs for Data. Also, the AI for EU project deals with it, and a German project which is called KI Marktplatz, AI Marketplace, where IDS standard is used to make a AI platform as such data sovereign, and also to guarantee this massive, let's say, exchange or sharing of data via the IDS connector. So everyone who is interested, please have a look at the related project description of this project, or also to have a look in the publications of IDSA. I'm pretty much sure that these issues are tackled there as well. So we are more or less at the end of this hour. It was very interesting. I just want to close with some announcements. First of all, thank you, Matthijs and Franz. I think it was very interesting, a very good chat, a real data space dialogue, as we promised. The participants, thank you for actively contributing via the chat and via the question and answer. And I just want to close with looking in the next weeks. There will be very technical topics within the IDSA live sessions. There will be an integration test camp ensuring interoperability of IDS components, November 5th. There will be our monthly open consultation hour, Get to Know IDSA. So for those who are interested to actively participate, to join, have a look in the open consultation hours. And then there will be another live session, the views on IDS, trusts in the financial industry. This is an activity or a live session facilitated or co-organized with the project's trusts coordinated by University of Hannover. And then finally, there will be the BDVA forum next week. and there will be a track on European governed data sharing spaces from November 3 to 5, where my colleague Lars Nagel participates. Then there will be the Fraunhofer IDSA Data Ecosystems Day, end of November. And I should not forget to announce the first data sharing winter day in December. So if you are interested, please have a look and join. We would be very happy to discuss with you and to, well, jointly go this road towards data spaces in the future. Again, thank you very much, Matthijs and Franz, from my side, from side of IDSA and the co-organized EU project OpenDI. Have a look also on this OpenDI channels to well, investigate and see what's happening there. Thank you, gentlemen, and have a great day. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.